Series X isn't coming out for another month and a half. Xbox has given me the awesome opportunity of being able to test out and try a non-final version of the system. So everything I'm using right now, the software and such, is not final yet, so it's not really considered a final review, but this is a preview time where I can try out a bunch of new stuff. And one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time with right now is messing with the system's backwards compatibility. Like with the Xbox One, the Xbox Series X and Series S are continuing Microsoft's dedication to opening up more backwards compatibility options with their current gen systems. In this particular case, the ability to play Xbox One games and the same select list of Xbox 360 and original Xbox games. But what's even better about this is that because of the more advanced hardware in the Xbox Series X, we're seeing better performance not only on those backwards compatible games, but also on what were previously current gen games on the Xbox One. Some of this is fairly straightforward and obvious, like more stable frame rates, potentially higher resolutions, faster load times, but there's a little bit more that's going on, so let's play some games and check it out. So one of the benefits of having like a much more powerful system is that in games that rely on things like not having a specific frame cap, they're just going to get smoother and smoother and smoother than they were possibly able to on the Xbox One. One game that gives that option is Final Fantasy 15, which when you put it in light mode, sets the graphics quality to kind of its lowest setting, but then unlocks the frame rate entirely, and so it just looks so buttery smooth compared to what it was doing on the One X. Like, you ever get so used to a game in 30 that the moment you see it in 60, you're just like, what? And this doesn't just apply to frame rates either. There's also games that make use of dynamic resolution scaling, where it tries to maintain a steady frame rate. In exchange, though, it constantly adjusts the resolution of the game, but when you're using it on a Series X, it's going to maintain a much higher resolution than they would have on a One. I just want to note how crazy it is to me that this thing is dead quiet. Like, it's not even making any kind of noise right now. I mean, the One X was already a really quiet system, but this is the point where if it wasn't for that on light being, on, I wouldn't know if it's on. It's just, it's room tone right now. So when I first got the chance to try this system out and, specifically focusing on Xbox One games, one of the titles that really occurred to me right away was Control. Because I had a lot of fun with Control in the Xbox One X, but it was definitely one of the games where I could tell it was trying harder. Frame drops during some more intense scenes, the game kind of stuttering a little bit when I was opening up menus or closing things down. There was just definitely some noticeable times where the One X had to put in some work. And none of that is really present right now on the Series X. I am running around, shooting stuff, blowing things up. It's maintaining its frame rate the whole way. I pause and it's basically instantaneous. It's definitely faster, that's for sure. Actually, one of my favorite little kind of dumb things about this is that on the One X, I know an issue that would occur a lot is the map would not load properly half the time. Like, you would just get the locations you could travel to, and then you'd have to wait forever for the actual map outline to show up, and that hasn't happened to me now, which is great. I appreciate being able to see the map. Yeah, I think there's a lot of great games that can showcase how, they already ran stable or looked good on the original system and are now even better thanks to things like unlocked frame rates and such, but this is just a really good example of a game that, pushed the previous system and doesn't. Because again, I don't hear the system right now. Now, of course, this is playing Xbox One and older games, because this is all backwards compatible stuff that we're focusing on right now. So I'm very curious to see how, once we're under the load of, next-gen games, whether or not that fan's gonna end up kicking up at any point. Because at least right now, with my experience, it doesn't. It is silent. Now, one of the big upgrades, of course, with next gen is the inclusion of SSDs in systems rather than hard drives, and the immediate benefit of this is that games will be loading up a lot faster on a Series X than they would on the Xbox One X. So one of the first games that really occurred to me for this was Red Dead Redemption 2, because that game's loading times are insanely long. So I'm loading up the same scene on both games where I'm just loading into fresh gameplay. And one of the things worth noting about this too, by the way, is that while the SSD is faster than the hard drive to begin with, if a game is actually patched to make use of Xbox's velocity architecture, they can actually load up even faster than what we're currently seeing. And in fact, as you can now see, the Xbox Series X is done loading, while the Xbox One X is it's still gonna be a while. So we'll just check back in later whenever that's done. Now, along with testing all the games that are continuing to be backwards compatible on the Series X, another thing we're able to kind of mess with right now is Quick Resume. Now, if you don't know what that is, on the Xbox One, you could have a single game suspended, and then while it's suspended, you could watch a movie or do other things, whatever, but you can only ever have that one game suspended. If you wanted to open up another game, you'd have to close it. On the Series X, you can have multiple games suspended, and while there is a limit to how many can be suspended at the time, it's pretty high, because I've been messing with multiple games going back and forth constantly, and in my personal experience, I've had about 10 games open, and I can go back to the very first one I launched, and it's still able to quick resume. Now, given some of the games I'm messing with right now are original Xbox games, Xbox 360 games, so you might hit that limit a little faster when it comes to Series X and S stuff, but all right, sorry to interrupt myself real quick, but the Xbox One X finally finished. It seems like as far as regular use case scenarios go, you're not gonna hit that limit most of the time. You can definitely handle 3 games, if you're worried about that. Oh, one thing worth noting with that though is that there are of course some specific games that might make that a little funkier. For instance, if it's like an online multiplayer thing, obviously you can't have it just be sitting in a lobby and then quick resume in that lobby. It will need to reset for situations like that. But like single player stuff, yeah, I can just play this for a while and then let's just go back to this. When you're talking about backwards compatible titles with the system, it's very easy to just focus on things like, oh yeah, you can hit a higher resolution, or you can hit a higher frame rate, faster load speeds. Those are all kind of expected things because of better hardware. Something else worth noting though is that for backwards compatibility in general, there are some new features on the Series X that are really interesting. And one of the ones that I actually haven't heard a lot of talk about just yet is Auto HDR. What this means is that games that previously did not have an HDR mode, either because they were released before HDR was a thing, like back on the original Xbox or Xbox 360, but even on Xbox One games that did not have HDR patches, they will now have an HDR mode that's being handled on a platform level of the Series X. Now, this video that we're shooting right now is not in HDR, so you can't actually see that in the gameplay we are showing right now. We are planning on, however, doing an HDR video in the future to really showcase a lot of that gameplay, especially once we're able to start playing some, next-gen games around review time. Another thing worth noting really quick too, by the way, is that any backwards compatible games that had special benefits on the Xbox One X, like Halo 3 for instance, is going to continue to have those special optimizations for the Series X. For a lot of titles, they'll still end up being roughly similar, but for those games that had Xbox One X enhancements, that is a Series X exclusive feature as well. In fact, let's just go ahead and I'll just switch back to Panzer Dragoon real quick. Along with that Auto HDR too, something else that's a nice bonus for, especially when you're playing like older backwards compatible titles, is that the Series X does also have better texture filtering than an Xbox One. So especially when you're playing like Xbox 360 or original Xbox games, all that smoothing that's happening to make it look like a more modern title is just gonna look even better. Also, just real quick while I'm playing and I'm thinking about it, controller definitely has a bit of a not broke, don't fix it vibe compared to the Xbox One controller. It feels very, very similar. In fact, I have a One controller right here and switching between them. There are some differences, primarily in the feeling of the plastic itself. Given this is possibly not the final version because this is like a preview version of the system I'm messing with, but the plastic on this controller feels like a softer touch plastic, and there is texturing that's been added to the triggers and the back grip, which is present in some special edition Xbox One controller designs, but has not been completely standard just yet. At least the texturing on the back of this is a little extra different. And then visually, there's a couple little changes, like the way they handle the, there's not like the front bump up here. The bumpers actually do feel a little different. They don't have that same kind of lever feeling. So overall, very similar to an Xbox One controller, but there are some light refinements going on here. Oh, and then the D-pad, obviously, is very different. I actually like it. It still has the same kind of button feel as far as how the internals go, but because it is that mixture of rounded with the raised directions, it strikes a pretty good balance between, having 4 clear directions for games where you need that, or giving you good rolling inputs when you need that for like fighting games. One other difference worth noting, and I haven't opened the controller yet because I don't really want to mess with these ones, I'm sending these ones back, but from the feel of the front bumpers on the Xbox Series X controller, I think that's been redesigned. The original Xbox One had this kind of lever design going on, and that sometimes would cause them to break, especially if you were very aggressive on the bumpers. It feels like a different button mechanism going on the inside of this, and you can even see the top design is a little different too. So once I'm able to actually open one of these up guilt-free, I'm gonna check that out. So yeah, that has been my experience so far playing on a Series X. Again, this is not final in general. There are probably going to be some differences once we see the full release in November, so I'm very interested in seeing how that progresses. But based on this preview experience so far, the Series X is definitely running games a lot better than the Xbox One, given it is much more powerful hardware. And I think what's really surprised me the most is A, how well Quick Resume works, and B, how well I was doing all of this and switching between all these different games and playing some that were very straining on the Xbox One. The Series X was just dead silent the entire time. So I'm going to continue messing with this preview version of the Series X. I do have more videos planned in the long run in the future, but for now, based on at least playing some backwards compatible titles and messing around with Quick Resume, it leaves an awesome first impression.